Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another special afternoon meeting with our very special guest today, Terry Deary. If you want to go back and catch up with the other two special afternoon meetings we've had, you can do. Just go to the website careers.tanfieldSchool.co.uk and they're on there for you to watch. So last week we had Carly Telford, the England and Chelsea goalkeeper, former student of Tanfield School. And the week before that we had David Fisher, the TV editor of His Dark Materials and Doctor Who. Today, we are delighted to be joined by the author of the very popular Horrible Histories book series, Terry Deary, who you can see on screen here with us. Terry's sold over 25 million copies of his books in over 40 different languages and is one of Britain's best-selling authors. The Horrible Histories books have developed into, and you don't need me to tell you this, TV shows, films, magazines, theatre shows, and exhibitions. I just want to take this opportunity before we jump into the conversation with Terry to thank all of you who put questions to Terry, which hopefully we're going to get through. And I just want to thank Jaden, Michael, Lachlan, Millie, Matthew, Molly, Willow, Lucy, Emily, Jess, Alicia, Logan, Ellie Jane, Ashton, Katie Jo, Phoebe, Joseph, Dylan, Harry, Tyler, Ollie, Michael, Ash, Daisy, and Jaden. Thank you for submitting those questions. Terry Deary, welcome. How are you doing? Are you all right?
Yeah, a bit cold. Yeah, it's because I'm just over the hill from Tanfield, and so I've got all the snow and ice that you've got. So you can imagine, not very warm.
Yeah, it's freezing. Have you been out in the snow at all? Have you managed to enjoy it?
We've got a farm. My wife runs a farm, and so I go out and help to defrost the pipes, start the tractor, walk the dog, and I just had a message from somebody who said, I just had a lovely walk in the snow with my dog. And I said, there's nothing lovely about the snow when you work on a farm, you know. Oh, different world.
So what kind of, I didn't think this was a route we were going to get into, but what kind of farm have you got? Is it?
My wife keeps sheep.
Oh, right, okay.
My daughter and her children are into horses and ponies. So it's a mix of sheep and ponies.
Oh, wow.
With the odd cat, dog, rat. You know, that's a typical farm.
What we've been doing in this series is kind of going back to the start with a lot of our guests and saying, well, how did you go from somebody who's local to our area and someone who, even though you live very close to Stanley, from Sunderland, how did you get from there to kind of being one of Britain's best-selling authors and probably the writer of one of the most popular set of children's books ever, really? So can you take us back into kind of your roots of Sunderland and yeah, let's just go from there.
I've got to keep it brief because last month I was 75 years old, so I don't want to take you through 75 years.
Yeah, just the highlights would be great.
I was not a great fan of school, and nobody ever suggested go to university for a northern lad in 1965. So I got a job with the electricity board, which I hated, and my friend said that he was going to college. And I said, oh, that sounds great. So to escape from the electricity board, I went to college to do drama, and I became a professional actor. And as an actor, it's hard to get work. So I had to go to the middle of Wales to be an actor. And it was in a town called Brecon, and we toured the countryside. And the big key for us was to tell stories about the people whose villages we were visiting. So there was stories. Nobody had written a play about Buck or Crickhowell or Bilf Wells. We had to take the material and write our own plays and act them out. But we did this through improvisation, and eventually I would get the job of knocking those improvisations into shape and creating a play from the ideas. Until in the end, people in the company just said, Terry, write us a play. What are you going to do? Oh, we're going on summer holiday while you write the play. thanks, mate. You know?
And was
And
that was playwriting something that you kind of trained to do, or did you just
Not
pick it
really.
up? And
I'd studied a lot of plays, but they were George Bernard Shaw and William Shakespeare and Sheridan and that lot. They weren't contemporary, but it just seemed to come natural to me to give it shape. And they said, after the summer break, we're going into schools to do a schools play. So write a school story. And I wrote one about a cowboy, and I hated the John Wayne movies where the guy in the black hat beats the guy in the white hat, but the guy in the white hat ends up punching the guy in the black hat harder and winning through violence. I thought, no, life's not like black and white, it's grey. So the Custard Kid was a grey character. He acted tough, but really he was a bit scared of things like spiders. You know? And he got into trouble by accidentally taking Calamity Kate's jewels. And to cut a long story short, the play was a great success. It was very funny. It was so funny, I can still remember to this day, 1974, playing to a hall of very young children. And in front of a little girl in the front row was a big puddle grew because she'd wet herself laughing. That is a sign of success. So if any of your pupils there are wetting themselves laughing, thank you. Right. After 6 weeks, we packed the costumes away, and within a few months, I moved on to director theatre. And one day, I was working, I had a day off, so I went to the local library. I don't know if you've ever been to a library, but they're books in order, 000.00 to 999.99. I thought, oh, I've read a lot. I wonder what would happen if I start at 000.00. And that book happened to be How to Be a Writer and Get Paid. I thought, that's stupid. But I picked it up and it said, write about something you know and like doing. I thought, well, I've got The Custard Kid and a few other stories. I wonder, as Custard Kid, we packed away the costumes as actors, and Custard Kid died. How can I bring him back to life? I can turn them into a book. And I was totally ignorant. But this book said, write it up as a book, send it out, and see if any publishers like it. So I wrote the book, put it in a big brown envelope, sent it off to a publisher, and a couple of weeks later, back came a big brown envelope. My script back. Never mind, because I was stupid, remember? I thought, oh, never mind. I'll send it out to another publisher, and another, and another. I sent it out to 23 publishers, and they all very kindly sent it back in the big brown envelope. Some of them, and it shows how ignorant I was, came back to me with like, oh, we liked your story. Unfortunately, we only publish prayer books. Oh. So that's a matter of research. You really need to know your target audience. And the 24th time I sent it out, back came a little white envelope. What? Who's this? We like your book and we will publish it if you make a few changes. Wow, yes. And so I was a published author with The Custard Kid, and it came from me being an actor, creating plays and turning my plays into a book. The second book was very important. It was called The King of Tarantulas. And like The Custard Kid, it had been a successful play. I sent it off to a publisher who published Custard Kid, and they said, no thanks. Oh. So I sent it out 23 times again. No thanks. I sent that book out 73 times. And back it came every time. And you know how you see these cartoons with a light bulb above somebody's head? That was my light bulb moment. I know why the publishers don't like The King of Tarantulas, because it's rubbish. And sometimes you've got to be honest. Not everything you do is going to be good. So I wrote a third book and it was accepted straight away. And that's how I got into writing, from being an actor to turning my plays into books. And the rest is history.
I like that because these past 3 weeks when we've been talking to David Fisher and Carly Telford and now yourself, the theme of regular failure cropped up a lot in terms of that being the road to success, and kind of you getting your script back over and over and over again. You could see that as a failure, and a lot of people would probably see it come back once and then stop, not even sending out to a second publisher. Has that kind of, is your journey to where you are now, has that failure helped shape you in any way?
Absolutely. I mean, you measure yourself by your failures. A very clever general in the Second World War, whose name I can't remember, said, it's not how far you fall, it's how far you bounce back. And I must be made of pretty tough rubber because, you know, I've had knockbacks all the time. And the thing is to be realistic. I knew a guy who'd written a murder mystery novel, and he sent it out over and over again. And he sent the same book out over and over again, about 90 times, and nobody published it. And sometimes you've got to balance determination to succeed with realism. If you get knocked back a certain number of times, you should maybe be asking yourself, am I doing something wrong? And what can I do to put it right? Or can I go to somebody for advice, somebody objectively who'll be honest with me? And so, yeah, it's bouncing back, keeping going, but at the same time being realistic. I would love to be a Premier League or even a Championship footballer, you know, but I haven't got the talent. And no matter how hard I work at it, I will never be a footballer. I reached a certain level and then hit a ceiling and stopped. So you can't get to my age, 75, and say, I'm going to still try. I'm going to write to Tottenham Hotspur tomorrow. I haven't tried them. And say, can I have a trial with you, please? I've been playing football for 70 years. You've got to be realistic. And just because you get knocked back, and, you know, I failed a trial at football, you've got to say sometimes, you know, maybe I should try something else, writing books maybe, you know. So, yes.
No, one of our students, Logan, asked this question. I think it kind of follows on nicely from that. Where do you get your motivation from to keep going?
Right. I don't know. I'm just driven. I think it may be from my childhood. I said my dad owned a butcher shop in a very, very poor part of Sunderland, just after World War II. It had been bombed, and some of the houses were still slums, and some of the people were absolutely poor. I used to make the sausage in the shop from the age of 5 or even younger. And I made it into little links, 3 skinny links for 6 old pennies. And for some people, that would be their tea. It was pathetic. And I was lucky. My parents worked hard enough to get us out of there. We kept the shop for 15 years, and I worked there every weekend and holiday, and I saw poverty firsthand. I've been very poor when I was a student, when I was an actor. And I think I really know I need to work hard and keep working because I don't want to slip back into being poor. There's no shame in being poor, nothing wrong with it. I did it for years and years and years, but it's rather more pleasant to have some spare money. And I think my motivation is to make a living, to keep my family, and to keep feeling I'm needed, that somebody reads my books and says, I love your books. I feel, right, I've done something good, so I'll write another book. And so that's probably my motivation. First of all, I don't want to be poor again. And secondly, people appreciate what I do, so which is really nice. I'm very flattered. You know, something I always tell people who write to me is, thank you for reading my books, because the most important person is the reader. If you didn't read my books, I couldn't write them. If nobody listens to a piece of music that Mozart writes, he couldn't have written them. And all the artists in the world, if David Beckham, nobody came to see him play football, then he wouldn't make a living. It's the readers, the listeners, the audience, the crowd at a football match. They are every bit as important as the performers. So I am grateful to the people who read my books.
So you've talked about kind of writing those first couple of books. Was it long until you started writing the horrible history books, or did it take a while?
Yeah, it was 15 years. And the way it happens in publishing, you write books, send them off, and they come back, and you sometimes... And I published about 50 novels for children until eventually I was seen as a safe pair of hands. Give Terry a job and he'll do a good job. And they asked me to write true monster stories. Great success. I said, yeah, I can do that. True ghost stories. And they even came to me one week, and this is an example of being a conscientious worker, and said, can you write true shark stories for the series, which was popular? I said, yeah, give me a postage stamp and I can write all I know about sharks on the back of it. I said, but I still said, yes, I can do it. And a very important thing for me is, when do you want it? And they said, 8 days' time. Ah, right. Remember, this was 1989, before the days of the internet. I had to go to the library and get a pile of books and write a 2,000 word story a day, 8 stories into a book, off to the publisher. And in 1 week, I wrote a book to their specifications. I didn't write true shark stories and send it off. They came to me. And because I was seen as reliable, people think writers are artistic and they're inspired. They're not. Well, a lot of them are, but I'm not. I write because my publishers tell me this is what people want. So the next one along was the Father Christmas joke book. Can you do a Father Christmas joke? Yeah, I can do that. And I went around pestering everybody for jokes from crackers. What is Tarzan's favourite Christmas song? Jungle bells, jungle. I didn't say they were good jokes, right? But the book was a great success. Can you write a history joke book? What? You know, you've heard of the guillotine for cutting off people's heads. Where did the French buy their guillotines? In the shopping centre. Boom! And they said, you know, some of these jokes are a bit old. Can we liven the book up and put some interesting facts in? Well, I didn't know any history facts, but I got researchers to do it for me. Take, for example, the guillotine. And this interested me. What did the French, and this is true, not a joke, what did they test the guillotine on? You've got a criminal, you put him on a guillotine, you don't want it to fail and only sort of hurt him a bit. You want, whoosh. So what would you test it on before you put a live human on? Can you tell me?
No idea.
They used corpses from the local mortuary. They picked up a dead body, put it on the guillotine and tested it. Then they picked up the bits and buried them. I thought, that's interesting. You know, what sort of person could do that? It's far more interesting than the jokes. I mean, could I do it? I don't know, could I? And this is the interesting thing I found about history. It's not about old stories. It's about human behaviour, how people behaved in the past, and measuring yourself against them. And suddenly history took on a whole new meaning for me. And we filled that book with facts and a few jokes, and we come up with something completely new. Instead of a joke book with facts, we came up with a fact book with jokes. And nobody had done that before. Why not? Because history is a serious subject. And he was making fun of it. And the book sold really well. First one was Tudors, second one Egyptians, third one Romans, fourth one Victorians. Then, and this is a secret for all people who want to be writers, luck. You've got to have luck. Because in 1995, out came book number 5, and it just happened to be The Blitzed Brits about Britain in World War II. 1995, the war ended in 1945, so they were having 50th anniversary celebrations. And the bookshops filled their windows with the usual old stuff: Anne Frank's Diary, Carrie's War, Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit, Goodnight Mr. Tom, all the old stuff. And there was this new book, Horrible Histories, Blitzed Brits. And the book took off. The others were selling well, but people said, oh, that's good. And they went back and read the others, and we had bestsellers. I was sitting in my living room one Sunday afternoon, and there used to be a program on television called Bookworm with Griff Rhys-Jones. And he used to interview authors, and they used to put statistics up. And along the bottom of the screen came a little ribbon of information. And it said, #1 best-selling children's book this week, Horrible Histories, Blitzed Brits by Terry Deary. I was watching this. I said, that's me, that's me. And my wife was cooking the Sunday dinner in the kitchen. She came running through. What's the matter? What's the matter? I said, I'm #1 bestseller. She said, oh, is that all? I thought there was something wrong.
Terry, there's a few things there that you said that it would be great to pick up on. And the one thing that struck me was when you said that people tend to think authors are inspired.
Yeah.
And then in a book it'll just come to them and they can write it. But and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the point you were making was actually it takes some graft, it takes some hard work. You've got to put the work in order to do it. And I think that it's such quite a vital message for like a life message, isn't it? Really, that actually we it's very easy to look at people who are successful and go, right, you've obviously got a gift there that was God given, or you were born with it. But actually, when you look beneath the surface, it's not usually an inspiration. It's not usually a gift that someone's born with. It's actually a lot of hard work, isn't it?
It's also the 2 words, do it. I've had lots of people, they say, oh, you're an author. I've got this great idea for a book. And for the next half hour, they bore me rigid with their story for their great book, which is going to be a bestseller. And I've never read one of these dozens of people's books who've come to me and said, why not? Because they don't write it. They don't actually do it. It's all in their head. And it's not enough to be in their head. If you want to be a lady's hairdresser, you go and cut somebody's hair. You might bodge it up a few times first. Never mind, hair will grow again. If you want to be, I don't know, a dog walker, do it. Don't say, hey, look at that person walking 5 dogs. I'd like to do that. And then do nothing about it. Whatever it is you want to do, go and do it. And if it doesn't work out, try something else. Find out what you're good at and get paid to do it. And yeah, the 2 words, do it. Don't talk about it. A very cynical author called Raymond Chandler said, people who ask for advice about writing aren't writers. They're just people who want to be writers. And I met them all the time, great idea, but they don't do it. Do it. And then work out if you're any good at it.
We had a question from Tyler who asked, how old were you when you wrote your first book? And I'm guessing that it fits nicely onto what you just said, because you don't it doesn't matter what age you are, does it?
No, I was 30 as it happened, because I'd spent my career working towards being an actor, which was probably my 2nd or 3rd choice career. Writing is my 6th choice career, by the way. I do not want to be a writer, okay? Can we just make this clear? It's hard work. And not many writers make a living out of it unless you get a best-selling series like Horrible Histories. So, yes, Tyler is... I hope that answers Tyler's question.
Yeah, and there's another thing that you talked about, and that was when the publisher would come to you and say, right, we need a book on sharks, we need a book on ghosts. It strikes me that you didn't start off as an expert in the subjects that you were writing about, but you had to become almost an expert quickly. And we've got a question from Jaden who says, would you class yourself as a historian?
Not in the sense that I've got any qualifications. I didn't go to university and become a historian. And I'm not sure that what I do is history. I write a history of the horrible, which is not quite the same as writing a history that you would get in your school books. And I'm not interested in dates, even though my publisher makes me put them in, and dry facts. I'm interested in the most amazing subject in the world, and it's called human beings. You know, I want to look at stories about people. I've been, at the moment, I don't know if this is one of your questions, I'm writing a book about the history of the railways. And some of the stories are about human beings. I'm just on the bit about George Stephenson building a railway line from Liverpool to Manchester. And the merchants in Liverpool and the merchants in Manchester wanted to send their goods to each other quickly. Raw materials, Liverpool, cotton, send it to Manchester, they'll turn it into cloth, send it back to Liverpool. And what a great idea. A train could do it in 40 minutes. Brilliant. But there were some people who owned barges and paid a fortune to build canals, which were slow, iced up in winter, ran dry in summer, and they hated it. So they did everything they could to stop a railway line being built. And this is human greed, human self-interest. And that's what the story's about. It's not about railways. And this was done in 1829. It's about human beings and the plots. And they persuaded the villagers on the route. When the railway comes, it'll scare your dogs and cats. The miners over there will all be out of business. So the miners picked up their pickaxes and threw one of the surveyors down the mine shaft. You know, these are the stories about human beings like you and me. And one thing I don't like about history is the focus on what we call the great people, the kings, the queens, the prime ministers, the war leaders, and the great events, which are usually battles, the Battle of Trafalgar. For example, everybody knows Nelson, Lord Nelson, and he won the Battle of Trafalgar, and having won it, he walked on deck towards the end of the battle with all his medals to show himself to the enemy who shot him dead. Idiot. What did they do to him? They stuck him on a huge column in Leicester Square as a national hero. And the Battle of Trafalgar, I'm sorry, wasn't that important. It wasn't life or death. Let me tell you another story. In the Battle of Camperdown, 10 years before, the Dutch were about to invade. And if they broke through to Britain, the whole war against France would have been destroyed. Britain would have lost. And you and I would be speaking French now. And the lead British ship had its mast blown off and the flag came down. Flag down, we surrender. And the Admiral said, will anybody go up to the stump of the mast and nail the flag back on while being shot at? And a fella from Sunderland called Jack Crawford said, why, aye, sir, I'll do it. Jack Crawford climbed the mast, nailed the colours back on, and Britain won the battle. Jack Crawford, far bigger hero than Nelson. And how's he remembered? He's got a little statue in Sunderland and a rather crummy building named after him. He's forgotten. Why? Because he was working class, you know? And I'm very passionate about this. The more I learn about history, the more I say, do you know who the biggest heroes in history are? Mr. and Mrs. Peasant. Because if it wasn't for the peasants doing the work and supporting the rich and the ones who are in the books and the libraries, we wouldn't have the world we have. So I'm sorry, I'm getting very political here, right, and ranting, but it's my favourite rant. Forget history. History has been distorted and twisted. And the other thing that's forgotten in history is women. Women hardly ever appear unless they're queens, or Queen Elizabeth I, who was an utter unpleasant woman. I'd better watch my language here. She's remembered, but people like Ada Lovelace and people like her are forgotten because they were women. They did hugely important things, but history gets it wrong. History plays to the reading classes. I say, I want to read a book about Nelson or Winston Churchill because they are national heroes. Nobody wants to read a book about Tom Brown down the road or Jack Crawford because he was a common man. So I identify with Jack Crawford, not Nelson, up on his column. And the pigeons give their view of Nelson in a very apt way.
Yeah, we'll leave that there.
Thank you.
You say that your characterization of history for kind of being for those upper classes and being the stories of just those people who were chosen and not being representative. However, if you actually look at where a lot of us, especially students and children, get their history from, I imagine most of them are getting it from your book. So do you see yourself as kind of
what statistics have you got that to back that up?
Well, best-selling author, 25 million copies.
Yeah, but it's 35 million, by the way.
Sorry.
Come on, I'm not vain, but 10 million books is a lot. Yeah, they get their history from school, like I did, and they get a distorted history. Let me have another run. Never mind Nelson, the most evil person in history, maybe apart from Hitler, is Henry VIII. And people love him because he's a larger-than-life character. And the sort of history I was taught in school was, okay, Henry could be a bit cruel, but he was a strong king, therefore he was a good king. No, he wasn't. He was a psychopath. He was a monster. He should never be allowed to rule people like that. That's the history that I got and still pervades a lot of school books. My books are not school books. I write for the general reader. I don't write for schools. So when you say children get their history from me, it's not history, and it's not what the national curriculum would tick the right boxes. They want dates. Why do they want dates? Because it's testable. When was the Battle of Hastings? 1067, cross. 1066, well done, Jimmy, tick. Easy to measure. But who was the greater influence on British history, Jack Crawford or Lord Nelson? That's very vague. And you've got to think about it. You've got to argue your case. And what is great mean anyway? And that's what I try to look at without preaching. I know I told you Jack Crawford's greater than Nelson, but that's not strictly true. I would challenge your view on sticking Nelson on a column, is what I'm saying. So, do students get their learning on history from me? If they do, teachers are doing something wrong.
Okay.
And real historians have sussed this. And a historian called David Starkey said Terry Deary is a parasite because he pinches all the best bits from the other books and puts the best bits together. So I'm a parasite, like a leech or a bloodsucker. That's me.
So you've written you've written about a lot of history, a lot of periods of history. even though you say you're not writing about history, you've written a lot about a lot of periods of history. We've got a question which was quite a popular question, actually, from Phoebe, Joseph, Ollie, Jess, Emily, all asking, what's your favourite period of history to write about?
I get asked this all the time because people think I'm a historian. You now know I'm not. And as far as I can see, they were all dirty and disgusting and cruel, foul food, terrible toilets, you know. You would not have wanted to live in any era of history unless you were rich and powerful. So for me, the best era of history was when I grew up as a boy, which for you is history. It was the 1950s, where the world, even though we were poor, I did manage to have a bike and we could cycle from my home in Sunderland all around the town, go out into County Durham. Not a lot of cars on the road, not many people had cars. We could have picnics in strange woods and we felt safe. And there wasn't the internet, there wasn't the pressure of sort of the teenagers feel today, of Facebook and that sort of thing. It was a very quiet and contented time. So for me, the best time in history was the 1950s. Now, let me tell you a story. A little girl came to a signing and I signed a book and she said, "Excuse me, Mr. Deary," because little girls talk like that. "Excuse me, Mr. Deary, what's your favourite period in history?" And I told her that story. I said, "The 1950s." And she thought, she said, "Oh, was that the Middle Ages?" No, it wasn't. I'm not that old. Some people say I'm so old I write history from memory, but I'm not that old. Come on. I think maybe she needs some history lessons in school.
Ash, one of our students, has asked kind of the opposite question. What's the worst time in history do you like writing about? Or do you not like writing about?
Probably the Stone Age. I don't like writing about because I said I don't write about things, I write about people, human beings. And it's very hard to find individuals. You can find their bones, you can talk a bit about them, but you don't know who this fella hated, who he loved, who he married. You might know how he died. You might know that a friend of his cut a hole in his skull to let the bad air out. It's called trepanning. Very painful with no anesthetics, but you don't know about him. So I'm not a great fan of the Stone Age and cavemen. I've written a book about it, but a lot of that book was about the archaeologists and the experiences they went through and some of the things we can tell about the ancient people. But they had my admiration. If they could survive in the conditions they lived in, wow, what sort of human beings must they have been? And remember, they didn't live long enough to accumulate wisdom. They were dead by the age of 30, 35. So they had to cram an awful lot of intelligence and have it passed down by their parents before they were able to survive. So cavemen, I admire them, but I wouldn't like to have written about, lived them, and I'm not keen about writing about them.
Yeah. Yeah. Just anybody watching this, I'll be able to say you're full of those stories that not many people know about, and you've got a really good way of making them interesting, drawing an audience in. And I guess just from listening to you and from your books as well. Lachlan's asking, where do you get all these kind of obscure stories and wacky facts from?
Oh, they're all in the big fat history books. Sometimes I have researchers reading them for me. But sometimes I've got to read them myself. And the one example that stands out for me is Roman history. And I gave a researcher, this is 25 years ago, a book and said, read that for me and pick the best bits. And they came up with one or two bits about Roman feasts, you know. And then towards the end of the book, which they had not registered or told me about, I came across a story. that in the city of Rome, which people think is marbled grandeur, people used to keep pigs and cattle in their backyards. And one of these cow, escaped. And it came to a Roman house that was being chased. So it panicked and ran in the house. It ran up the stairs, got to the very top of the roof and panicked. And in its panic, jumped off the roof, splat on the ground. Wow! What a great, horrible history story. First of all, because it's horrible. And secondly, because it tells you something about life in Rome at that time, which wasn't how I pictured it. Marble columns and centurions in fine helmets. It's about people keeping cows in their backyard, you know. And my researchers missed that story. And I suppose that's why nobody else writes horrible histories the way I do, because they don't have the eye for the disgusting, the unusual, and the things that could say, wow, I didn't know that. And there's an awful lot I didn't know. And the other secret is, if I was a historian, and historians write books, as you know, I sometimes feel the voice, if you like, of the historian is, now then, I know this, sit there and listen, I'm going to tell you, right? My voice is, God, you'll never guess what I've just found out about the Romans. Totally different. And the second point is, I'm a children's author. I've written 50 children's novels before I did horrible histories, so I know how to talk to young people. So that's why horrible histories probably are a success. I'm not a historian, I'm a children's author. And I'm also a bit mad.
How do you go? This is a question from Millie, and she asks, how do you go about developing an idea? Because I guess you've just given us an insight into when you kind of get that spark of an idea. Yeah. It kind of, and I guess this is more of a question for those who maybe want to be authors, want to be writers. When you sat there in front of a blank page, how do you go about from getting from that process into getting something that's a good story, that's something that can be published?
You know, when I went to school, we spent a lot of time with the teachers saying, it's very important to write a powerful first sentence. Rubbish. If these teachers who taught creative writing knew how to creative write, they'd be writers, not teachers. So what I discovered is the most important sentence in the whole book is the last sentence. And J.K. Rowling, you might have heard of her. She's written a little series of books called Barry Potter's or something. I think she did quite well. She wrote a 7-book series, and she said the first thing she had was the last sentence of the 7th book. And I've written a 6-book series about the Tudors in Chesterley Street, Washington area called Tudor Chronicles. And I knew my last sentence before I wrote the first one. And if you're an English teacher, especially in primary schools, you say, write a story, then you can see the children set off. A typical one, I was walking down the street one day when I saw someone following me, and off they go, and the story fizzles out to nothing. Why? Because they didn't write the last sentence. Once you've written that last sentence, you work towards it. You never let it out of your sight. It's a bit like going on a journey. If I set out from my house and start walking, I'm going to be lost and abandoned within a couple of days. But if I say, right, I'm going to Middlesbrough, then I set off, I follow the signposts, and I don't see a sign that says, oh, Manchester this way. Oh, that's interesting, I'll go off in that. No, I'm going to Middlesbrough. And if that makes sense, then it'll make writing easier. Know where you're going, and the rest will flow, whether you're a beginner or not. And of course, the second thing is write. Don't talk about it, write it. On the third thing, which I also mentioned, if you're writing to be published, don't forget your reader. I have met an author who was asked by a student, who do you write for? He was Scottish. I write for myself, he said. And he won a few prizes, then he disappeared off the face of the earth. Real writers, journeymen like me, write for an audience. They want to entertain, they want people to turn the pages and keep turning them. And that's very important. Write for an audience, write for a target, the last sentence, and actually write it. Don't talk about it. There you are. There's free advice. For 44 years as a writer, you owe me about £1,000 for that.
The check's in the post, Harry.
Good,
So
good.
Amazing advice for anyone who is wanting to be an author. And I guess just putting that together with what you said before about kind of just of getting on with it. It doesn't matter what age you are, just get on with it right now. If you want to write, just get writing now. It doesn't matter if you're in primary school, secondary school. There's a question here. I think it's probably quite an insightful question, really. It's from a student called Dylan, who says, in order to get the success that you've had, is there anything you've had to go without, anything you've had to give up?
Yep. I said writing is my 6th choice career. My first choice career in the blue remembered hills of days gone by was to follow my dad into the butcher shop. That would be number 5. And number 4, to make a living, I used to work as a barman. I used to love that. Meeting people, serving them drinks, hearing their stories. Number 3, I've done television presenting as part of my career. People come to me, will you do a program about, and I present. I love doing that. Number 3, as you all know, is I'm an actor. And I had to I can't act while I'm sitting here 5 days a week writing books. I occasionally drop into one of my plays. And my number 1 career is being a country music singer. And I was a country music singer in the northeast of England, and my career was just taking off. I did a great show at Concert Trade Unions Club once. You might have heard of it. I think it's closed now. And then I went off to be an actor, and I did music and singing, and then I can never quite get my career as a singer back on track. So the first thing I've had to give up is my dream of being a country music singer. I will sing you a country music song if you like. There's my guitar over there. I just wait for people to say, please, will you sing us a song? I love a live audience as an actor or a singer. And so I've had to give that up. And my wife will tell you, right? People say, so where are you going on holiday this year? But I don't take holidays. In the 45 years we've been married, I've had 3 weeks of holiday because I'm paid to write books. So if I take a holiday, I'm not writing books, I'm not getting paid. And I used to say this, oh, I don't take holidays. And my wife said, stop boasting about it. If you don't take holidays, I don't get holidays. It's not something to be proud of. Sorry, pet. So I'm not boasting about it. But if you want to know what I've given up, it's not just me. It's my wife who's given up holidays. She does occasionally go away with friends or family. But yes, especially if you're self-employed, if you don't work, you don't get paid. And remember, I am not an author, as you so kindly called me. I'm a writer. I write plays, I write television scripts, and I'm writing a movie at the moment. So don't call me an author. Or here's a story from Burn Hope. A little boy saw me in the shop, and he went home and said to his mum, Mum, I've just seen that Arthur. She said, who? Arthur. She said, I don't know anybody called Arthur. You know, he's an author. He writes books. Oh, an author. So in Burnhope, I'm Arthur, the author.
We've got
I'm not an author. I'm a writer.
We've got a question. It's a video question that's been submitted by Lucy, so I'll play that now for you.
Hi, Terry. What is your favourite book you have published and why?
All right, so Lucy asked her what...
Yeah.
You heard it? Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. You know, if you meet a woman who's got 10 children and you said to her, which is your favourite child? And she picked little Jimmy, the other 9 would be upset. So I've published 325 books, right? If I tell you my favourite, the other 327 will be upset. They're in my bookcase behind me there. They'll come out and hit me on the head. Okay. I wrote a fiction series in the 1990s called The Fire Thief. And it was published in America, France, and it was a best-selling fiction book. And I don't get many best-selling fiction books compared to Horrible Histories. And it was funny, it was exciting, it was a page-turner, and had a great story. And again, I'd written the last word of the 3 books before I started. And it worked beautifully, and I'm so proud of it. Nobody's read it these days. You know, it's out of print now. And tell you the worst comment I've ever had about one of my books was The Fire Thief. Because one of these newspapers wanted to do a father and daughter interview. My daughter is a horse rider, an eventer. She does things like badminton and burley horse trials. And so they wanted the horse rider and the author. And I had to do her job for a day and groom her horses. And she had to come to a book signing with me. And she had to read one of my books. And I published 100 books. And the little madam had never read one of my books. She read books by other authors who I didn't like and said they were great. So she was forced to read one of my books. And the book I was promoting was The Fire Thief. She read it and she said, the worst comment I've ever had. And she said, oh, it was quite good. What? Your no daughter, quite good. That's an awful thing to say to somebody. How's your teaching, Mr.? Oh, you're quite a good teacher. Horrible.
That's good for me, Terry. That's good. I'll take that as a win.
Will you? Okay.
I think we had lots of other questions, but you've as we've gone through this chat, you've addressed them and you've answered them. So I'm hoping those students who haven't got to specifically feel like their questions have been answered. But I've got one last question, and it's from Phoebe, who says, "Do you have a favourite obscure historical fact that you can share with us?"
You know, I can pick up a Horrible Histories book and I can read it and thought, oh, I never knew that. Because my brain cell will only hold a few facts at a time, you know. And I'm just doing railways at the moment. So the historical fact that's with me at the moment is the very first train in a passenger train was the Stockton to Darlington Railway. And it set off from Darlington, got to Stockton, and because it broke down a couple of times and a couple of people were injured, it was an hour late. Can you imagine the first train in the world an hour late? It would never happen these days. And the locomotive that pulled it even was called Locomotion. And what they never tell you was locomotion went on. It was a useless engine. And one of the drivers decided he wanted more steam from it. So he tied down the safety valve till the steam built up, and he didn't manage to untie it in time, and the boiler exploded and killed him. So locomotion, which you can now see in Darlington Museum, nobody ever tells you it killed the driver. Second thing, nobody ever tells you the driver's name. It was always, oh, the driver died. He had a name. I hate that. And I found out his name was John Cree. And the third fact was his fireman was nearby, and he got sprayed with sooty water. And when he'd recovered and the scabs had gone, his face was covered with black spots. And the bullies at work forever after called him Spotty, which is a horrible thing to do. And I think that's typical of human nature. You know, you call somebody the driver instead of his name. You don't tell the bad bit of the heroic locomotion, and you forget to mention that human beings can be pretty horrible and pick on a poor boy who was covered in black spots for the rest of his life.
Yeah, and I think that kind of sums up, I think, why a lot of our students love your books, Terry, and I think it's because you do put that human side across, and you bring it to life. So it's not just the facts and the figures. It's brought to life. And how is something brought to life? Well, through the humans who lived those lives. Terry, it's been amazing to have you on, and our students were very excited to get a chance to ask their questions and to kind of sit here, albeit virtually, but to sit here with you this afternoon and just to kind of take some pearls of wisdom from you and kind of thanks. So thank you so much for inspiring us and for sharing this hour with us.
And as I say to the people who write to me, thank you for reading my books. If you didn't write them, I couldn't. If you didn't read them, I couldn't write them. Thank you.